Hello and welcome to the Soul's Conquest. Today we are in conversation with Mario. It's super exciting. We have been talking about this for a while, and when I connected with you on one of our earlier calls, it was so awesome to speak with you. I was like, I need to get this dude on my podcast, and here we are. And you were the one who said it first, and I was like, okay, that means we're vibing. So I'm super excited to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm doing very well. Got up early, got a little bit of a workout in,
Mhm.
so I'm ready to go.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. How much do you want me to tell?
Oh, this is your episode. Go crazy.
Okay. Let's see. I'll just give you the short version. I am currently in Honolulu, Hawaii, on some little islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, very, very far away from India. And I originally come from Los Angeles, California, on the mainland United States. I grew up in Los Angeles. I went to Art Center, which is a design school there, and became a graphic designer. I worked for a lot of the movie studios out in Los Angeles, like Disney, Warner Brothers. I did a lot of work for different industries like Ford and um, different musical um, uh, people like Nine Inch Nails and things like that. I always worked strategy into my work from pretty much the beginning, just trying to figure out a bigger picture of why we're doing what we're doing. I moved to Hawaii about 12 years ago. And for a little while, I took a break from design and strategy and really focused on God and focused on being centered myself and making sure that I was carrying out the calling that I needed to carry out, and worked with a ministry, worked with a church out here, and help young adults understand their path and their part in this world. So I did that for about 8 years. But during that time, I started designing again and doing branding. And so I did a lot of branding for the fitness space and the CrossFit space here locally. And eventually just started pushing more into brand strategy and mindset has just been something that I've always been um, innately done over the years. So for either for high school kids or college kids or post college adults, I've always helped people with their mindset. So that's really the two areas that I focus on now. I focus on brand strategy and I focus on mindset, and sometimes I focus on mindset strategy for brands. So
Wow, that was awesome. You kind of answered the next question that I wanted to ask you, and that was,
sure.
can you share your graphic? What do you create now? You can take a deeper dive into this because you've already shared bits and pieces over the previous answer. You can talk about something that you're creating right now, as of this moment, or you can speak about mindset training and how it really works into brand strategy. You can, yeah, do your
Okay.
thing.
Um, I'll just talk about mindset a little bit. And where I'm focusing right now is helping people find clarity on who they are and helping them become clear on how they think.
Mhm.
So whether we believe things that are not true, whether we believe things that um, are not true about ourselves, or we believe things that are just false in the world, and we carry on our lives as such. I help people just take a step back and gain clarity on what they believe, how they believe it, why they believe it, and
Mhm.
really assess how they look at the world. Um, the way we think has everything to do with how we live, and
Mhm.
so when we think a certain way, we will live a certain way. And so if we think negatively, if we think with scarcity mindsets, if we think um, with greed in mind, or we think with joy in mind, we will live those thoughts out.
Mhm.
Um, the way we think dictates the way we feel, and the way we feel dictates what we do. And so that's what I've been focusing on right now. I just finished a mindset conference, and that was really wonderful to see people from all over the world take part in that. Both my friends that were on as speakers, and the people that became the community of the Mindset Reboot, which is really amazing. And so, and with brands, I do the same thing. I help them think about who they are and what they're doing and why they're doing it, and help them really understand that how they think about what they do internally colors what they actually do in the world and for their customers and how they speak to them. So that's a little bit about
Yeah.
what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, that was powerful. My gosh. I do want to ask you though, because you're talking about mindset, and because you spoke about negativity and positivity, what do you have to say about toxic positivity? And do you believe in that? What are your thoughts revolving around that?
Did you say toxic positivity?
Mm-hmm.
So if I understand what you're asking, um, toxic positivity to me means that you don't want to see that there is negativity in the world, and you
Yeah.
refuse to see it.
Yeah.
And so to be toxically positive means that you are, in some sense, refusing to see the world as it is. And so when you're overly positive, which I think being positive is a wonderful trait, but not at the expense of seeing the reality of the world around us.
Yeah.
There's a lot of heaviness in the world. There's a lot of evil. There's a lot of bad things that happen in the world. And to
Mm-hmm.
turn a blind eye and put our hands in the air and say everything's great, everything's wonderful,
Mm-hmm.
that's dangerous. That's
Yeah.
actually very, very dangerous, because then we don't act on our convictions. We actually don't
Mm-hmm.
have any convictions, because in our mind, everything is okay.
Yeah.
And that means that murder is okay, and
Mm-hmm.
people going hungry is okay, and um, people suffering at the hands of other people is okay. Slavery is
Mm-hmm.
okay. Those things
Yeah.
are not okay. Those
Mm-hmm.
things are not okay. So toxic positivity, I believe, is at large a huge part of why we won't take action in this world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I do agree with you. And, because there was a part of me where, okay, so earlier on, before the pandemic started, there were a lot of things happening in my personal life. And I preferred after a point to just turn a blind eye and just be like, okay, I'm gonna shut myself out, surround myself with only positivity, block out all negative emotions, forget that any negative thing happened in my life, basically disregard my own trauma. And there came a point in time in my life where I realized how bad that was. I wasn't necessarily aware that I was playing into the toxic positivity topic. It was just a really it was really a way for me to protect myself. That I was just layering myself in bundles and being like, trauma doesn't exist. But I think there came a point in my life where I realized how bad that was, and that I really needed to sit with my trauma, sit with my feelings, and just let them happen. And I think that happened after a lot of meditation, that I realized that, okay, I need to sit with this. I need to not ignore it, because, and this is something that I tell all of the people that I work with right now, is that the more you ignore your negative thoughts, it's like a child whose balloon has flown away. It's gonna shout. It's gonna shout at you, and the more you ignore it, it's gonna, like, get a megaphone or something. It's gonna shout at you. The more you ignore it, the more you try to run away from it, the more you're surrounded by it. So in your mind, you're running away, but you're not really. You're just surrounding yourself with layers and layers of negativity. So I realized personally that when I sit down, when I let myself just be with be with it, be with whatever happened in my life, it allowed me to actually embrace positivity, because I was not running away from something, I was letting it be. And yeah, I think personally, I had like a good experience with like I had an experience with toxic positivity, and I realized how harmful that was for my mental health. Um, and yeah, here I am telling people not to run into toxic positivity.
Yeah, I think it's I like your description. I think of it more of like if we're going through our day and somehow our hand gets cut off and we look down and we say, oh, it's okay, I have another hand, and we just go
Yeah.
about it, and we don't take care of it. We just
Yeah.
kind of let it go, and slowly all of the blood drips
Hmm.
out, and
Yeah.
we will die
Yeah.
because we refuse to take care of what was harming us and what has harmed us.
Hmm.
Um, I love that you figured out that feeling it is okay,
Yeah.
because it is okay. We
Yeah.
need to feel things. I think being, toxic positivity is one thing, but toxic ambiguity is another thing.
Hmm.
If we don't regard anything at all,
Yeah.
positive or negative,
Yeah.
so if we don't take the time to feel what we feel, we are emotional beings, and we
Hmm.
need to feel things, and we stop and let ourselves feel things. I think there's too many people out there trying to be stoics, not wanting to feel things, and that's
Hmm.
dangerous
Yeah.
because we shut off a huge part of what makes us human,
Hmm.
and it will harm every relationship in our lives.
Yeah. I completely agree. Wow. We diverted from that topic. So let's circle back. While it was an amazing conversation, let's circle back. I want to ask you, you spoke about mindsets right now. Why do you work with mindsets in particular? Like, was it something that happened in your personal life that made you turn towards looking into mindsets with a more like closer eye, or a, just taking it in and being like, okay, this needs to be spoken about? Or did something happen in your life particularly that made you focus on mindsets, or was it something completely different? And yeah.
I think um, I'm not sure if anything was like specific that made me think of mindset or started me thinking about mindset in particular,
Mm-hmm.
other than growing up and having a particularly difficult time with my own negative self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
So in that instance, I grew up beating myself up about not being perfect, not making everything right, not doing it right the first time, not being the strongest, not being the fastest, not being the best.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that was very dangerous because I was not allowing myself to try things, to test things, to fail, to
Mm-hmm.
grow. I was
Yeah.
hindering myself from growth. And so I started really in myself, just starting to think about like, how can I change that part of me? And it all went back to how I thought about stuff. I thought that I needed to be perfect to be liked. I needed to be perfect so that people would accept me.
Mm-hmm.
I always had a need to be accepted. When I was younger, my parents had a really rough time, and eventually got back together, and they're completely fine now. But um, they had a rough time at a very pivotal part in my life, and that's really what started me having negative self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until years and years later that I started trying to correct that in myself through understanding truthfully who I was. I'm a Christian, so I started reading my Bible more, and diving into who God says I am,
Mm-hmm.
how much He loves me, and how I'm okay if I fail. He loves me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to start thinking about myself in the way God thinks about me instead of the way I wanted to think about me. And it wasn't even me. It was really just these negative thoughts in my head that were very demeaning and harmful for my life. And I still struggle with it. I still struggle with negative self-talk and beating myself up and wanting to be perfect. And it's a daily practice.
Yeah.
Just as doctors practice medicine, you have to practice being mindful of how you're thinking and how you look at the world.
Yeah.
Because if you're not careful, you'll slip back into just seeing everything through a very dark and diminished lens.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I especially love the fact that you spoke about mindful. Being mindful is not just a, do it once and forget all about it. It's a regular thing.
Right.
Um, because I feel like a lot of people just forget all about it. It's like a trend that happens, and you're suddenly like, oh my God, everyone's being mindful, so let me be mindful, and then you forget all about it, and then it's a very harmful way of life. Like I have seen a lot of people do that, and I love that you're sharing this part of mindfulness, that it's a regular thing, it's a daily thing. You don't want to slip back into the dark part of yourself. You want to be where the light is. So
Yeah.
yeah. I also, you spoke about failure and growth. How important do you think failure is for growing, and do people need to shy away from it or not?
I think failure is imperative for growth.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not willing to try and fail, then you're not willing to grow.
Yeah.
Growth requires failure, and
Mm-hmm.
all we have to do is look at babies for that example, right?
Yeah.
If if you look at a baby, you look at the simplest, most purest form of human, and
Mm-hmm.
it's right around where they start trying to walk,
Mm-hmm.
right? They don't try once and stop and then sit down for the rest of their life after they fall. They stand up and they try to take a step and they fall, and they stand up and they try to take a step and they fall, and they do that until they figure out, hey, I can take more than one step, I can take more than two
Mm-hmm.
steps.
Yeah.
And um, we are our own example in that sense,
Yeah.
right? The funny thing is, people around the baby aren't saying, sit down, you're going to hurt yourself. They're saying, keep going, get
Yeah.
up, get up.
Yeah.
When does that talk change
Yeah.
for the world? Because more often than not, now later in life, if you try something that is really hard, most people around you are going to say, why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Stop doing that, sit
Mm-hmm.
down.
Yeah.
And all you want to do is take another step so you can grow.
Yeah.
But everybody around you, for the most part, is saying, don't do that.
Yeah.
So when does that conversation change? When does that mindset change in ourselves,
Yeah.
depending on the view of the person that we're talking to? Why are we so discouraging from growth now?
Yeah. I wonder. I feel like there's like this weird relationship between perfectionism, failure, and growth. People think that being perfect allows them to grow, whereas being perfect
Mm.
prevents them from failure, which just makes them fail more because they are not looking at the bigger picture. They're not really growing. So I feel like there's this weird relationship that comes in, and we start to live more in tune with the society. So like what society has to say, right? What are the norms? How are we supposed to live? How are we supposed to exist? Which is good. I think there needs to be a balance between remembering that you are still a part of a society, of a community, but also remembering that you're your own person. So there's like this very delicate balance between that. But I do think that perfectionism also starts to play a role in preventing us from failing, which irrevocably makes us fail. So what do you have to say about that?
I think there's a really interesting relationship there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it, failure leads to growth,
Yeah.
right? And there cannot be any growth without failure.
Mm-hmm.
Perfectionism shies away from failure,
Yeah.
right? So if you are so focused on being perfect, you're
Mm-hmm.
actually hindering yourself from growing anywhere, because
Yeah.
you're trying to be perfect in the idea that you have presently of what perfect is. And without failing, you will never grow that idea of what truly amazing could be. Because truly amazing is much better than perfect any day, because truly
Yeah.
amazing requires testing, requires failure, and micro successes.
Mm-hmm.
And all you have to do is look at, there have been tests done, and and there was a study done where, um, in a photography class, and
Mm-hmm.
half the class was given one assignment, and half the class had said, they said to half the class, I want you to, you're going to be graded on how many pictures you take. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter if they're good or bad. I want you to take as many pictures as possible. The other half of the class, you're going to be graded on your best photo. So I need you to turn in one photo. Well, half the class went out and just started shooting as many pictures as they could. And the other half of the class really studied and looked into understanding what a good photo was, and really worried about, like, they didn't take many pictures at all. They tried to take the perfect picture. And everyone on the side of the class that took as many pictures as possible
Mm-hmm.
outgrew and took way better photos than the other class, than the other half of the class,
Yeah.
because they tested and they failed and they learned and they grew through understanding and taking photos, right? They
Yeah.
failed every day, multiple times a day, and the other class never failed at
Mm.
all until the end, when
Yeah.
they turned in whatever they turned in,
Yeah.
because it was just okay, because they
Yeah.
never learned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that story, and it's really good that you brought that into the picture, because picture you brought that into the picture, because that makes a lot of sense, right? Like failing many times a day versus failing the main objective. So, mm, what are you gonna put? You know,
Mhm.
where are you gonna put more pressure or weight on? So, yeah.
There's also
Uh,
a term in sales, like when you're
mm-hmm.
trying to sell things, right?
Yeah.
In sales, they tell you to go out and get your no's. So
Mm-hmm.
you're supposed to go out and get 100 no's a day,
Yeah.
right? What's going to happen if you do that? That means you have to ask at least 100 people to
Yeah.
buy something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what you're doing is you're learning how to talk to people. You're learning what their objections are. You're learning how to convince them that what you actually have is something that they want to buy, right? So
Yeah.
pretty soon those hundred asks turn into more yeses than nos, because you're
Mm-hmm.
getting so much better at asking the questions and offering your offer. So
Yeah.
I the salesmen that have been in rigorous sales programs that I know
Mm-hmm.
are fantastic at failing. They'll try anything because they're
Yeah.
used to fail. They're used to getting that opposition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rejection makes for a better lesson, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, how did you start right now? Can you share your creative journey with us? Now you've shared bits and pieces of this in the previous answers, but what was it that made you decide to join art center or go
Mm.
into the art field?
I've always been interested in art since I was a young person.
Mm-hmm.
One of my earliest memories of being asked what I wanted to do when I grew up was, I was maybe 8 years old, and my mom asked me what I wanted to do when I
Mm-hmm.
grew up, and I was coloring at the time, and I said, if I could color for a job, that would be cool.
Yeah.
I would just color all day.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to after high school, after my lower schooling, I went into university um, as an engineering student, which was not art. And
What?
I quickly
What?
realized, I
Yeah.
quickly realized that I didn't want to do biology and chemistry and physics.
Mm-hmm.
That was not something that I wanted to do. And a friend said that he was going to go to an art school in San Francisco, and I was curious. I didn't know that you could go to school for art.
Mm-hmm.
I found out that Art Center was very close to me, and it was a much better school. And so I spent a year and I put my portfolio together, and I went to that school at night for night classes to learn things that I didn't know yet and how to put my portfolio together. And so I took a year to do
Mm-hmm.
that, and then I got in the next year.
Wow, that's awesome.
After that, it was just I I knew that that was the only thing I wanted to do was design
Yeah.
art.
Wow. Now, when you are working on a project, let's talk about both aspects, right? Like when you're working on a branding project, what do you hope to achieve before starting a new project? You can also link this up to mindset because I feel like it's closely integrated with your process. So, what do you hope to achieve before starting a new project?
I hope to achieve what the what the client really inherently needs as opposed to what they think they want. So
Mm-hmm.
my goal whenever starting a project is to find out the true underlying need and motivation of my client and helping them understand that, helping them work towards that, discover that, and then we
Mm-hmm.
solve that together. That's always my goal.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't always work out. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
the client is very very focused on what they think they need,
Mm-hmm.
and as an expert, I come in and I try to help them understand that that's actually not the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
based on my expertise.
Yeah.
But sometimes they just they just want what they want. So it
Yeah.
doesn't always work out, but my hope is that I help them see things a little bit differently and help them solve their greatest issues.
Yeah. That's awesome. What do you hope people who are viewing your project post completion feel like?
Which project are you talking about?
Any project. So let's say you're working on a branding project, you work with a client and you've put your work out there. Now, what do you hope people who are, just going through your profile
Mm,
and they see this project, what do you hope they feel like?
that's an interesting question.
Hmm.
Um, that's something I used to care deeply about. I used to
Okay.
care deeply about what others thought about my work.
Hmm.
And I've since come to the realization that it doesn't really matter what anybody thinks other than the client.
Yeah.
Um, the client and I worked on something very specific,
Hmm.
and we hopefully solved their deepest issue and problem
Hmm.
through many hours and days and months of work
Yeah.
and blood, sweat, and tears. And
Hmm.
if someone who wasn't part of that process doesn't like it, doesn't like the outcome, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It
Yeah.
really doesn't matter. But I used to really care about that. I used to care. I used to gain, and I think this is something that creatives struggle with a lot. Is
Hmm.
I used to really gain validation from what other
Hmm.
people thought of my work.
Yeah.
Now, is that the case? Where do people still, not like things, and does it hurt my feelings sometimes? Well, yeah, of course, I'm human. But at the end of the day, I remind myself, well, it's not for them. It's
Yeah.
not. It's this is not. This was not their project.
Yeah.
I don't care if they would have done it differently because they didn't get hired to do it.
Yeah.
So it really is very subjective, and I try not to worry about that. And so I actually I don't even share a lot of my work a lot of the time,
Hmm.
not because I'm worried about what people think, but it just doesn't matter. I let my
Yeah.
clients share the work and I let them be proud of it and I let them um, bask in the glory of that. And I'll share their stuff, but I
Yeah.
don't come out, I'm not sharing my logos or my brand strategy process. And
Hmm.
just because it's not, it's not for me to share really. I'll
Hmm.
share how I do things, but
Yeah.
I won't share the things that I do necessarily because
Hmm.
it doesn't really matter at the end of the day.
Yeah. I want to ask you, how did that shift happen from, giving people and what they think importance to focusing on what your client ultimately
Mm.
wanted and if you achieved that or not?
Uh, well, that was a hard shift.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it took a little while. I found myself very overly concerned with um, perfectionism, right? And
Yeah.
we're circling back down to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I wasn't listening to my client
Yeah.
and I was providing them a solution that A, they didn't need, and B, they didn't want, I would get really frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more I listened, the more they felt heard, and the more I presented actually less and less work to them for them to be excited about, I
Yeah.
realized that the more I listened and the more I included them in the process, that's what mattered.
Yeah.
And if they loved it because they paid for it and they were part of the
Mm-hmm.
process,
Yeah.
and they are the ones that are deeply invested in the solution,
Mm-hmm.
that's literally all that matters. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter if designer 553 from Kentucky thinks I did a terrible job. It doesn't really
Yeah.
matter because
Yeah.
my client liked it.
Mm-hmm.
We arrived at a solution that this person wasn't a part of,
Yeah.
and we were successful, and the client is successful. So
Yeah.
that's literally all that matters.
Yeah.
I think we get overly concerned with what other people think for no
Mm-hmm.
reason.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really strange. I don't know why we do that, but creatives are
Yeah.
notorious for that. And I think it's because we're used to putting our work up for people to
Mm-hmm.
critique
Yeah.
um, when we're learning. But
Yeah.
once we've understood our process, once we understood how to do a certain thing, it really
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day doesn't matter what everybody thinks.
Yeah.
You know, if you're overly worried about submitting for awards and all this stuff, okay, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, those awards don't mean anything.
Yeah. I feel like validation played a role, like a lot of, or a very important role, to be honest. Because, as creatives, like when I was a writer, I would always put up my stuff out there on the internet. Not only because I wanted to share it, but because I was like, oh my God, please tell me what I'm doing right or
Tell me
wrong.
if I did it right, or tell me if
Yeah.
I need to improve. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
It
If you're
doesn't
share,
matter.
I think it's healthy for us to share our work. I
Yeah.
do,
Mm-hmm.
and I've shared it many times.
Mm-hmm.
I just share it in a different form. I share my work in form of content now.
Yeah.
But I think it's very healthy to share our work if we have a healthy attitude about
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing it for. If I'm
Yeah.
sharing it to share process, to share what
Yeah.
I did, to share how I
Mm-hmm.
did it, to share with others and help them get better, that's a really great reason to share. If I'm sharing so that
Mm-hmm.
people can clap and get likes, and that's not healthy.
Yeah.
That's not healthy for us. So
Yeah.
we have to take a step back and really understand why we're doing what we're doing, and why we're sharing what we're sharing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, why is it important for you as a creative to have or to present that kind of clarity to your client and to reach that solution that, works for the greater good for the client? Now, why is that important for you as a creative? And what journey did you take to reach that part? Now, you've shared bits and pieces
Mm.
again over the previous answers, but do you want to take a deeper dive into this?
Why is it important that I reach the best good for my client when we solve a
Um,
problem? Is that what the question is?
yeah, kind of like, you said that you kind of have this entire process where you get clarity as to what the client needs. And, you are like, okay, this is what the client needs. This is the greater good. This is the big solution. Now, why is
Mhm.
it important for you as a creative to do that? And what was the journey you took from when you started till now?
There's many reasons for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One major reason is that if we're not solving the right problem, then we're not doing our job,
Yeah.
right? As creatives,
Yeah.
as a designer, if I come in and say you have an automobile, and I know automobiles are very expensive in India, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say you have an automobile and the brakes are not working right,
Yeah.
and you take your car to the mechanic and you say, my brakes aren't working, and the
Mm-hmm.
mechanic says, actually, we need to fix your engine
Yeah.
because your engine needs fixing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay. And you get your car back, and the mechanic says it's all fixed. And you get your car
Yeah.
back, and you're driving down the road, and the brakes still don't work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, has he solved your problem? Absolutely
Yeah.
not. Your
Yeah.
brakes still don't work.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you think the engine is off, but your brakes are really dangerously broken. And the mechanic does the opposite thing. He fixes your brakes and he looks at your engine and makes sure that everything's okay. Well, he
Mm-hmm.
fixed your greatest need, right?
Mm-hmm.
My goal is always to make sure that I'm solving the right problem for my client, and we do that
Yeah.
through a thing called strategy. And I
Mm-hmm.
dive in and I discover who they want to talk to, why they want to talk
Mm-hmm.
to them, why they're doing what they're doing in essence,
Mm-hmm.
if they're solving the right problems for their customers.
Yeah.
And I come in and help them get clarity on who they are and why they're doing that. And so from that, we start to discover whether or not they're solving the right problems, whether
Mm-hmm.
they're asking the right answer, asking the right questions, and
Mm-hmm.
giving the right answers. And so through that, if we can define what it is that they truly need, then we're going to
Mm-hmm.
solve a much bigger problem and a much better problem for their business. Um, some
Mm-hmm.
people just ask me for a logo, and really what they need is a brand. And if they don't
Yeah.
understand that, then we can't work together, because I can't just make them a graphic. They should just go to
Mm-hmm.
anywhere and get them a graphic. They can just look in a
Yeah.
book and get a graphic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, in your journey as a creative, what were some of the obstacles that you faced, and what were some of the solutions that you came up with to overcome these obstacles?
Outwardly, I don't know that I had many obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was free to explore my creativity. I was free to define my own path for my creativity and my design journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the major hurdles that I had were my own mind
Mm-hmm.
and myself being my greatest enemy,
Yeah.
not letting me try things, not letting
Mm-hmm.
me pursue things that I wanted to pursue, or pursue things that um, would have been better for me.
Mm-hmm.
Getting out of my perfectionist mindset, getting out
Yeah.
of my unwillingness to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Those were my biggest enemies. So I've always been my biggest enemy. I think we are always our biggest antagonist in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And until we take a step back and take ownership of that, take ownership of our own story, we're never going to be able to fix that,
Yeah.
because we're always looking outside. And if we
Mm-hmm.
look outside of ourselves first,
Mm-hmm.
then that means that we're readily looking for excuses. We're readily looking for scapegoats, people to blame.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to blame anybody for
Yeah.
my life but
Mm-hmm.
me. I
Yeah.
chose to do what I chose to do, and that's all on me. That's my responsibility.
Damn, that was so powerful. Oh my gosh, like really, I have goosebumps here. You can't really see, but that was so beautifully put together because, like you said, we are often, I think it's a kind of default mechanism that we are looking towards the outside whenever we face some problem. We're like, oh, that thing is to blame, or this aspect of my life is to blame. But what are you really doing to shift that position that you are in right now? Because sometimes things are out of our control. Like that's the honest reality. Like
Absolutely.
sometimes things just don't work out. But what is your mindset in that? How are you taking that part of your life? So like when I dealt with a lot of my trauma, I knew that all the blame game that I was playing, putting up on myself, the burden that I was putting up on myself, I knew that I had zero control over that.
Mhm.
But what exactly was I really doing? Like, I was blaming everything outside, but I was like, how much am I looking within? And how much am I realizing that while a lot of bad things happened, a lot of good things has happened as well? Like, was I really grateful for the good things that happened in my life during that part of my life? So yeah, I genuinely love that a lot. what he said. Seriously. Now, as this is a spiritual podcast, I think it would be awesome to know if you have any spiritual or self care routines while you're working on a project as well as in your personal life.
I think personal and projects or work, it's all the same to me.
Mm-hmm.
In my personal life, spiritually, like I said earlier, I'm a Christian, and
Mm-hmm.
so my focus is always serving my God through everything that I do. And if with that, I try to daily. The first thing
Mm-hmm.
is that I do is I open up my phone and I'll read the Bible in some way, shape, or form. I'll listen to verses. I'll listen to devotions that are Bible focused, and I will listen to books that are Bible focused for the first hour. Sometimes I'll listen to it through the time that I work out as well,
Mm-hmm.
just so that I can start my day with my God and get centered spiritually. That's my daily spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
I also pray through the day. I'm always asking for strength and help and peace, and because I believe very seriously that we're in a spiritual we live in a spiritual world, and I know that you believe that too.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a spiritual world, and there's good and evil, and I believe that if I'm constantly living in this world, I'm going to be constantly attacked by negative things, and
Yeah.
negative things are not from my God. Negative things are coming from my enemy that want my
Yeah.
demise. And so the
Mm-hmm.
more I focus and invite God into my life and my everyday, the more I find that I'm at peace, and I'm focused, and I'm centered. And I know without a doubt that He loves me and that He's going to take care of me, because I read it in His Word every day.
Yeah. That was beautiful. Um, what is one of your soul's, or what was one of your soul's conquest, and what is shaping up to be your current soul's conquest?
Give me a little bit more clarity on that.
Okay, so when I say soul's conquest, I usually mean, I think of it like this, right? Like it's the side quest in a video game, where you have this one thing that you want to achieve. So you take a journey, you achieve that, and it's not really the main objective. It's not really the main quest, but the side quest in some way, shape, or form helps you on the main quest. So the soul's conquest is constantly shifting.
Mm.
The soul traveling from one aspect of a life to another. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I hope that clarified
Um,
it.
okay. In that instance, then um, I think my daily practice are my soul's conquests. My daily practice of um, prayer, reading the Word of God,
Mm-hmm.
and listening to Him, and leaving room for Him to speak to me, is my daily practice, and that is always part of my soul's conquest, because my supreme purpose is to become more like Jesus. That's my
Yeah,
supreme purpose. And
yeah.
so daily I want to look at where I am still lacking, and I want to call upon His power, His Spirit in my life, so
Mm-hmm.
that He can rid me of anything that is still holding me back. So
Yeah.
I cry out daily, and I ask for Him to um, find. There's a verse in the Bible that says something like, "Look within me and look
Mm-hmm.
at all the deepest, darkest parts of me, and take that out of me, because I
Mm-hmm.
want to be like you." And
Yeah.
that's my daily prayer. Um,
Wow.
Make me more like you, Jesus, and He does. He answers me every day, and sometimes, and I fail every day, and so I
Mm-hmm.
know I need Him. I need Him constantly.
Yeah. Wow. That was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that a lot. Yeah. Now, what is the one thing that has happened in your life that has created a huge impact? Something that has happened recently?
A huge impact. Okay, last year, during the pandemic, right when everything was starting to shut down,
Yeah.
my daughter was experienced a seizure, and she was diagnosed with epilepsy. She had never had a seizure before. She was 3 years old, and we didn't know what was happening. And so it was a very frightening, very scary, very um, uncomfortable time in my life. And we didn't know what to do. We were very scared, as my wife and I. She's our first daughter, and she's 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 so precious, and to see her experiencing something that is inside of her that I could not fix, I couldn't change, I couldn't affect with anything but my love. And that was a huge thing that happened in our lives last year. And through that, um, we've hopefully learned to rest on God even more and push into Him even more for our peace and for our sustaining every day, knowing that He's sustaining us even in this. God knew that that was going to happen, and He had already given us the strength to get through it without us even knowing about it. And so it's been a really big growth process for us. And she's doing well on her medication, and we haven't had any instances since, but it's been a very jarring thing over the last year.
Wow, I don't know what to say, to be honest. I want to say I'm sorry you had to go through that. She had to go through that. But
we go through things because I firmly believe that we go through hard things in our lives so that we can help other people go through hard things. And so this is just one of those things, as much as we were crying out to God, and we didn't ask, I don't think we ever asked why this is happening, but we would rather ask, what do we need to learn from this? What are you trying to teach us? And that was a huge shift years ago in my life, where I stopped asking why things were happening. And instead I would ask, what are you trying to teach me through this? Help me to learn that. And that was a huge mindset shift. And that's helped us through very, very many hard things in our lives.
Yeah, I definitely need to implement that mindset shift, to be honest. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I know it was a difficult thing to share, but thank you so much for sharing that. What is the one last thing that you would like to leave my listeners with?
What was the last part? What was the last one thing that I want to what?
What is the one last thing that you would like to leave my listeners with?
Oh, I see. If I could leave them with anything, I would leave them with this. Be grateful every day for everything in your life, the good and the bad, and always seek to take a step back and think about why you're doing something. Your gratitude is important for you to have perspective. Asking why you're doing something gives you deeper understanding as to what your actions are being motivated by. And then the last thing is, take the time to work on that piece of yourself, your mindset, because it does really affect everything that you do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That was really powerful. Yeah. And we are at the end of our session. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you had a good time. And I asked you some good questions.
It
Yeah.
was great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for being a part of this.